Keep up with the latest news on public education and more via sstuwa.org.au.
Well, hello and welcome to Western Teacher Live, the podcast of the State School Teachers Union of Western Australia. And today's subject is one that we know many teachers will be thinking about, particularly at this time of year, and that is reporting to parents. And I am delighted to have with me two of our growth team superstars, Chloe Hosking and Christina Chabros. Welcome to you both.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks for having us.
And of course, reporting is the most fun teachers get all year pretty much, and it does get a very sometimes complicated process, and it's something that the union has been trying to work on getting simplified to a great extent. So we do acknowledge that the SSTUWA acknowledges the Department of Education decision that has encouraged school leaders to consult and negotiate reporting processes for semester reports with staff. And we very much encourage branches to be collaborative with the school's leadership team to make sure that the workload reduction in reporting that is intended to be delivered is actually delivered. Chloe and Christina are going to take you through all of the processes that you should follow and those that you don't have to follow to some extent. But if you do have any changes occurring in your school, talk to your union rep. And if you perhaps don't have a rep in your workplace, you can call Member Assist on 089210 6000 or 1800 199 073, and those numbers are under the Contact Us section on the SSTUWA website. So Chloe, let's talk about how when you're reporting it's best to focus on reporting smarter, not harder.
Yeah, so the work that Christina and I do in the growth team is so much with new educators. And I think the first few times you do reporting, it's so easy to make more work for yourself than you actually need, and to get behind and to get stressed out. So we're hoping that we'll be able to give you some tips today that mean that you dodge some of those pitfalls that we've both fallen into in our teaching careers.
Many times.
And so the first one, I guess, is before you even start reporting, so hopefully you've already done this this year, is to try and stay organised in tracking your student progress. So it depends what your school uses, but you need to have a system. It might be an Excel spreadsheet, it might be a marks book, a record book, or your school's online data management system, if that works for you, to record any of your formative and summative assessments against the curriculum, right? So collecting that data that's really comprehensive, and it gives a good picture of where students are at for their achievement, and also some data about their behaviour and their attitude and their effort through the year as well, just some notes as you go, means that when you actually get to reporting time, you've got some really solid evidence there, you're organised and you're ready to go to write those report comments.
And Christina, it's important too to make sure that you've got an understanding of your own school's requirements and timelines.
Yes, Bob. So particularly if you're a graduate who may have just started teaching in the second semester, so you might not have written reports before, the very first step that I would start is just understanding what your school's reporting requirements and timelines are. So your school might have a particular way that they would like you to structure your report comments. They may have some sort of style guide that you can use to assist you. And most schools actually have comment banks that they might want you to use, so they're pre-approved comments. The thing that's really important to do is to make sure that the language you're using in your comments is parent-friendly, because they are the ones that are reading it. So none of this teacher jargon is necessary, and it doesn't need to be overly formal. So just something that's very simple to understand. And also, it's important really to start drafting these comments early. And if you do anticipate that you're coming up to a deadline, you're getting overwhelmed, you're thinking you might possibly miss it, it's best to communicate that early rather than letting it get right up to the deadline and then needing to ask for assistance. So my advice is definitely have a chat with your head of department or your deputy principal or principal sooner rather than later, so that they can actually assist you in finding a solution together to get these report comments done.
Awesome. And I'm guessing, Chloe, that it can be particularly stressful if you're a first-year teacher. Is there ways that they can access extra time, etc., to help them with that process?
Yeah, look, if you are in your first year, you are entitled, if you've signed a 6-month contract or longer, to some graduate release time. it's 2 days per term. Now, some schools timetable that as an hour a week. Others, you negotiate with school about when to take your 2 days per term. And I always say to grads, make sure you set aside some of that time to prepare for your reports. So the other part of that, I guess, is that if you're at a school where you're being given a lot of internal relief, it might be a good chance to have a chat to whoever's in charge of that, whether it's your graduate support person or mentor, the relief coordinator, the principal, and sort of say, this is actually the first time I've ever written a report, or this is the second time I've ever written a report, and it takes me a really long time, and I'm wondering if you could maybe put me towards the end of the list for internal relief, because I really need my dot time and my graduate release time at the moment. I know that I'm going to be able to do this really well in a couple of years' time. It's not going to be the same sort of time commitment. It's not going to require the same amount of thought. But right now, I really need your support. And the best thing you can do is to have that conversation really, really early, before you have any problems, before you start getting hammered with internal relief or the day before your report comments are due. Have it in advance. Make a time to have that conversation so you're not just tapping your principal on the shoulder while they're on yard duty, and make sure that they understand that you're not asking for anything major. You're just making them aware that this is all new for you. Sometimes they forget that it's not easy when you first start, and that you're keen to do it well and you need some time to do it. And then with that time, it's just so important that you use it as wisely as you can. Make sure that you prioritise your reports and don't get sidetracked with things that could possibly wait, because I know we've always got a huge long to-do list, but this is one of the inherent, really important requirements of being a teacher is reporting. And so we need to make sure that we get it right.
And Christina, I suppose one of the lessons that people learn over time is that some tasks can take a bit longer than you might initially think they may.
Yeah, that's right. And report comments are definitely one of them. They can take you a lot longer than what you anticipate. And for myself, I am definitely very much a perfectionist and a procrastinator. And so for me, the hardest thing was just actually getting started on them. And I found what helped me was really breaking up the workload into more manageable chunks. So I noticed that one of my colleagues was doing, 3 or 4 comments every night. Or, using their dot to try and do 3 or 4 comments every day, rather than saving them all and doing them all at once, which is just really overwhelming. And another colleague actually taught me to use the Pomodoro technique. So if you've never heard of this, it's basically a time management method where you set a timer, and I use 25 minutes, and that's where I would focus solely on doing my report comments, and then I would have a 5-minute break. And I found that made it less overwhelming for me, making sure I got rid of any sort of distractions that were around me to focus solely on my report comments. And I would do that about four times and then take a longer break. And that really helped me to boost my productivity, and just knowing that I had that break coming, so I could really just sit down and really work hard and then have that time to relax. And other things that also are important to keep in mind is you need to be looking after yourself at reporting time. It can be really, really stressful. So it's important to, look after yourself, clear your mind by going for a walk, have a chat to a friend, try not to, someone who's perhaps not in teaching, talk about other things, meditate. If you find yourself worrying about reporting when you're going to sleep, a good little tip is to have a notebook next to your bed and just write down whatever's in your head so that you can get that out of your mind and just really focus on your rest and recovery. Having a clear workspace, tidy space, tidy mind. And another thing that's good to do is to have a look at your weekly calendar and actually block out times in your calendar where you are going to be writing reports, so that other things can't come and take precedent over what's really important in Term 4, which is focusing on getting your reports done and doing a good job. So there's some little tips that I've picked up along the way as a primary school teacher.
That's excellent. And Chloe, I suppose you've got a couple of different, your customer in effect is the parent. You've already talked about working more closely with your fellow staff and the leaders in the school. How important is the relationship with parents at this time?
Look, it is really important, and we've always got to balance, how we communicate with parents with our workload and our work-life balance. But sometimes some timely communication can actually mean less work later on. So Ideally, reports shouldn't be a surprise to parents. And what you're wanting to avoid, I'm a high school teacher. If I send out 150 reports and 150 sets of parents are not happy with what's appeared on them, that's going to make my life pretty tough, my workload pretty tough.
It used to make my life tough when I was a student, but carry on.
Yeah, some of the kids as well. So, but it's also not great for the kids. Like, that's done. Their semester is over. They've had their chance to improve in it, and it's kind of they've missed the boat if it gets to that point. So, as I'm sure all of our new educators are doing, you want to be communicating well in advance with parents. Some of our information management systems let you sort of automate that. So if a kid has done really well on a test, you can automate every kid who got an A gets a little, email to their parents saying, that was great, well done. And kids who haven't passed a test or who you're really concerned aren't going to make it, your school often have templates that you can send out just sort of saying, look, I'm really concerned about this student. So you want to contact them early on. They don't want to be finding this out on reports, and you don't want them to be finding this out on reports. And I think that's not just the academic side, but also the behaviour and the attitude as well. It's great to make sure parents are clued in on that too. And that way you can take a bit more of a collaborative approach in the way you support your student. And I think the other part of that is for our kids who are on IEPs, our students who are on IEPs, you just need to make sure you're across how the school wants you to reflect that in your reporting. So that's the other part of that too.
Cool. And Christina, I know there's some sample plans that float around. Some people will be a little bit into where those would normally start, but they can follow some of the tips this time around. And, of course, the next time reporting comes, having those plans available is extremely useful. Just take us through one of those sort of sample plans that you might have followed.
Yeah, no worries, Bob. So I think the very first step is to make sure that you know what you're actually going to be reporting on in your reports. So take a look at what the school is requiring you to report on, and work backwards from that to make sure that you're going to cover the required content that you need to, and that you're actually going to have that data to make accurate judgments on your students' progress. So once you are really clear with what you are reporting on, take a look at what assessments you're actually going to perform with your students to make sure you get that data and have them written up, organised, ready to go. Use some sort of system to record your student grades. And something that I used to do was I had a notebook on my desk as a primary school teacher, and I pretty much had a page in there for every student that I would use just to jot down any anecdotal notes that I picked up during lessons of either things that I thought were really fantastic or things that I was a bit unsure about and wanted to do further assessing, or things that I was concerned about. Which come the time I was ready to write reports, it was great to open up that notebook and see I've got so many things in there that I can actually be using in my report comments. And anecdotal evidence is fantastic. So just have a think about how you're going to be conducting your assessments, that you've got a variety of assessment strategies, both formative and summative, as Chloe mentioned earlier, and schedule in that assessment time into your teacher planner to make sure that you're staying on track. So that would be, at the start of the term. Then perhaps maybe 4 weeks before your comments are due, I would definitely start writing them and doing them in those manageable chunks, as we've mentioned, doing 3 or 4 a day. Maybe about 2 weeks before they're due, talk to a colleague. You might have a buddy who is willing to read over your reports and give you some feedback in exchange for you reading their comments as well. And schools may have that expectation that that's what you are doing. And then a week before they're due, just make sure you've got all your grades finalised and that your grades actually match, the comments that you've written, and submit those to your who's going to be reading your reports for editing. And it sounds like a pretty good plan.
It does sound like a good plan, Chloe.
Yeah, and I think, look, I'm a high school teacher, Christina's primary, but what Christina's just described, works for us too. I think specifically for high school teachers, because we've got so many students to report on, depending on how your school does reports, or even just a grade, right? It's important that you've got a bit of an idea of what you are aiming for. So when I think about my grades for my students, I try and kind of group similar students in my head with their achievement. So I might have 150 students as a maths teacher. Some of my colleagues, language teachers, for example, might have 300 students that they need to grade and report on. And so I might think about what an A student looks like, and across my classes, I can kind of find a cutoff there between the A's and the B's. And it might be something that you do with your whole department as a high school teacher, where you're kind of trying to identify that kid, their achievement, potentially sometimes take into account their effort and their attitude is an A student, and then our next lot of students here is a B student, and it lets you kind of group similar students so that you're not having to make individual decisions on each kid. It also means that your data then is a little bit more reliable because you've got a bigger sample size when you're thinking about it.
Awesome. And Christina, I'm guessing similar tips apply for primary school reporting as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think with our general comments, you want to be not just looking at what students are capable of academically, but also how they're going socially and behaviourally in the classroom. It's a good idea to look back at your students' previous general comments, so either from semester 1 comments that you've already done or even the year before, just so that you know what you've already said and what the teachers before you have said, and don't be afraid to use that comment as a base and tailor it to fit where they are at now. How have they demonstrated any growth as well?
Awesome. So we're all in favour of recycling, so it's a very good idea. Chloe, I think possibly one of the things that, especially for new teachers, it can all become a bit overwhelming, and even for experienced ones for that matter, especially with the massive workloads that teachers experience now. Is it sort of the time when you need to remember how you look after a student who was struggling under pressure? Yeah,
absolutely, Bob. So we're really good at encouraging our students to ask for help and to teach them the skills that they need to do that. But when you're a teacher, you're like, well, I've finished 4 years of university and now here I'm in the classroom and I'm responsible for this. And you might think that you're expected to know it all, but you're not. Your more experienced colleagues understand. Some of them will remember what it's like to be in your first year of teaching and how tough it can be. Others won't, but you can always remind them. But while it's not their responsibility, not your colleagues or school leaders, to solve all of your problems, they're really such a valuable resource for some advice and some guidance, especially around something like reporting, which they all will have done twice a year for a very long time. So before you go to them, if you're not sort of sure, you don't know them well, or you're a bit nervous about asking for help, just have a little think about what you actually need help with. And if you sort of know what would fix the problem, or you actually asking what do I do to figure that out? And also just think about who you can go to for help. So often you'll have an experienced colleague who you've noticed seems really across their reporting. They're not pulling their hair out at reporting time, and they might be a good person to go and have a bit of a chat to about it. But just make sure, they're also under pressure. We know that our really experienced members are having, workload like never before, and they're probably a little bit stressed out too. And so just make sure that you get your timing right and you're not trying to grab them on their way between classes or when they've got a lot going on. Just pick a quiet time where you can have a chat with them. And then also, look, if the first person you talk to and you ask for some advice or some help can't help you, don't give up. I'm sure that there's someone else at your school, so don't be disheartened if, at first the person you approach is a little bit busy or maybe can't quite remember what it's like to be in your position. Don't give up, keep trying.
Okay, and Christina, I think also important to remember, not all that many people in life stand up in front of large groups of people and talk for a living. So they've actually got some background and have proven themselves teachers. Sometimes easy to forget that.
Oh, definitely. I think it's really important. It's so impressive to what you're doing now and where you've come from. You've worked so hard. You've studied at university. You've done these amazing pracs. You've managed to get a job. Don't be so hard on yourself. You've planned countless lessons. You've been able to manage life's challenges through all of your studies and now work. And just, we've all been there. First year teaching can be extremely difficult, but just keep in mind that every time you write reports, you're going to start to find out what works for you. Take in some of the tips that we've suggested and pick and choose what actually does resonate with you, and you'll find your own lessons along the way. It definitely will become easier. and you've got this. And if you're not already part of our New Educator Network WA Facebook group, please do join. We will be doing some reporting check-ins each week, and just to reiterate some of these tips that we've already mentioned in the podcast, but it's a really good supportive network to be a part of with other graduate teachers around the state.
It certainly is, and that's for any teacher in their first 5 years, and very much the theme of the New Educator Network is you don't need to swim on your own in this big, scary school.
That's right.
You can join in a group that's supportive, and that's what your union is there for. So if you're not a member of the SSTUWA and you're listening to this podcast, why not? Go and join, and if you're already a member, check out that New Educator Network. Make a note of the number 9210 6000. And the free call number 1800 199 073. You can also go to our website, sstuwa.org.au. There are people there who is literally their jobs to help you to get the best out of your teaching career and to overcome any difficulties that you're facing. So thank you very much, Chloe and Christina, for joining me today. And thank you, above all, for listening to Western Teacher Live, the podcast of the State School Teachers Union of Western Australia.
SSTUWA members are strongly encouraged to register for the range of industrial and professional courses available face-to-face or online. Find these courses online via sstuwa.org.au/training.